before Cheddars comes up and shares, or we move over to the room where we talk about go experience more Proverbs, I'd like to tell you a few things about how God has worked in my life. And there's like more than I don't have the time carved. We don't have the time here today that I can share everything with you. It's impossible. But I'd like to share a few. And Cheddars, who reached out to me earlier today to say that we didn't have anybody on deck to come up and share the testimony, and would I like to share some? And he said he has a few miracles that he's witnessed that he would like to share as well. And we're going to get to hear those in the future. Um, but that struck me as these miracles, these are miracles don't always need to be turning water to wine or something big and fancy, resurrection of death, or miracles are given to us personally for us. And so what may look like a miracle to one may not look like a miracle to another, but the impact it has on your life is most certainly a miracle. So I've got three, which I'll try and squish quickly. How much time do you need, Cheddars? I can put it down to two if I need to. Where are you, Cheddars? I think Cheddars might have moved to prepare the other room.
I think I
Okay, I'll
booted.
try. Oh, yeah, boot him out with you, Cheddars. Okay, he'll be back. So this first miracle, I'll just go in the timeline. All of these happened in these last like 3 years for me. Um, so for those of you that know me, I have a chronic illness. Sometimes it's extraordinarily severe, and I'm completely and utterly um, hope. How do you put it? Like, not just disabled or what have you, but like I need my husband at times to open doors and help you go to the bathroom, and like, bam, totally out, as much as out can be. Incapacitated, that's the word. Thank you, Phantom. Totally incapacitated. Other times I am blessed with the ability where my symptoms are less severe and I'm able to do things like serve here at VRMMO Church. Um, but there was this, I went through this series of times that happened over and over and over a couple of years. And this happened at the beginning, or it happened as COVID was starting, where I have this neurovascular instability where my blood vessels don't respond like they're supposed to keep my core body temperature, the core body temperature it should be. So where a normal person, their blood vessels are dilating or constricting, and you don't even notice it's happening. It's happening all the time, so that you have a core body temperature that keeps you alive. Mine do not. Mine go crazy. If it calls for a little expansion, mine like gorge and become huge, and blood rushes into my extremities, and it's extraordinarily painful. And there's a bunch of swelling and burning like fire, needles and stinging and electric. It's horrific. Anyway, that's the expansion. Or there's the constriction, a little bit of a constriction. For a normal person, mine goes into overdrive and it cuts off the blood supply. This mostly happens in my hands and feet, but it can happen in almost any part of my body. But I went through this period a few years ago where I didn't know it at the time why it was happening. I think I do now. But it turns out um, I would get this such extreme hand constricting dilation, that I was, this is my theory, the doctors still don't know what was happening, but I was getting um, not hypothermia, where you're in the freezing and sometimes you have to lose your fingers or your toes because you've got frostbite. I was getting frostbite in my hands, even though I'm in my house, chilling out, doing like I always do. Suddenly, I am developing these frostbite wounds that are deep down into the bone, the wounds that can't be covered, or it was the most pain ever, period, hands down. So extreme. And so when I would try and sleep at night, which was impossible because of the severity of the pain, and my pain would always increase at night, as it still does to this very day. That's why I kind of cut off early, like sometimes at 4 or 5 p.m., boom, I'm out because I get worse. But at this time, my pain would be so severe, I couldn't sleep ever, like more than just a minute or two at a time before it would become so painful I'd be awake again. And this would be with this burning fire pain. Can't describe it because you it's impossible to know it until you've experienced it, and I pray to God nobody here does. But it as if my hands are in fire. And I tried. Of course, I have all these fans. I've been living with this condition already for 10 years. Um, and so I try and use the fans to cool my fiery hands so I can get a little bit of sleep. But then at the time, I didn't know it was frostbite I had going on. So I'd use these big blowing fans to cool my burning hands, and they would cool, and I would fall asleep. But then I would wake up later with this horrible cold pain because what I was doing was causing frostbite, warming it, causing frostbite, warming it. The worst thing you could ever do for frostbite. So this cooling and heating was just further deteriorating and worsening the severity of my frostbite in my hands. Um, so I tried all the different things to give me some sort of measure of peace in the middle of this thing, and nothing would work. I hopped on Amazon and I was looking at some other like fan type options where you have more than just the 2 or 3 settings. There's this one fan I saw, it had you can up to 100 settings, so I could hopefully make it is weak enough to cool the fire without being so cold I'm furthering my frostbite. This is COVID was happening, and the shipping on everything was like, if it said it was 2 days, it was really a week if you're lucky. I was at the end of my ability to cope, and I don't know how to say that, and I don't know, thankfully, what it looks like to be on the other side of it. There's like this line where you can take a lot, but you can't take any more. And to take any more could possibly destroy who you are. I don't know how to say it. It could possibly get you into a pit that you could not climb out of. It could possibly, I don't want to imagine what it could do. There's a line that you, and I was right there. I was at that line. I could not survive. I couldn't, just the thought of existing another hour was unimaginable. And so I had ordered this fan in the morning. It said it would be here in 2 days. I didn't even know if it would help at all. Hunkered down to start my night. You know, my husband goes to sleep, and so he has to. So I'm ready to spend the long, many hours until he gets up again. He had taken off months of work to care for me. Um, and the door knocks at like 10 p.m. at night. And it's my fan. It was delivered in less than a day when it was 2-day shipping in the middle of the COVID shipping fiasco. And so I just burst down crying. I didn't even know if it would work, but this fan came. I immediately gave glory to God because that's where it goes. That's where it deserves. I think I made a little, and it really was, and it's hard, really was amazing, Phantom. And it's hard, like, for if you haven't experienced where I was, it's hard. It's a fan. What's the miracle in getting this fan, right? For me, it saved me. I was on the brink of I don't know what. And you know what? Just in theory, it worked. That ability to cool my hands enough to decrease the severe pain, but without, yes, he does. He absolutely helps Enzo. But without the extra cooling that was actually furthering the damage and just increasing the cycle, it worked. I got the reprieve. I wasn't like healed instantly or anything, but in that moment, that ability, this fan that I was blessed with, way way earlier than I ever could have imagined it. It gave me what I needed to be able to step just even a few feet from that line that I don't know what it's like on the other side. That is more than I can cope. Walker Walks, good to see you. Good to see you. And so that's one of mine. Keep an eye. I won't be able to share all three. So there's a second one. I wish I could share them all three because it's part of a bigger picture, how miracles can look like miracles don't have to look like the miracles that you think. And so there's this miracle of mine that was a miracle for me, even though it may not look like much to many other people. And then but it was to me. Quickly, in a nutshell, I wish I didn't have to do so quickly. My house, my getting this house that we live in now was a miracle to me. We had been renting long term, like 15 plus years, and our landlord actually gave us a big heads up, 5 years, 5 years. I'm moving back in. You guys got to pay out 5 years. So over that course of the 5 years, we started looking for a house. And we didn't have any savings or ability to buy a house at that time. So immediately we had to hunker down, start saving, do what we could to get prepared for this house. And I started looking at houses over the 5 years. There was only like one or two houses that even like fit our needs because of my illness we have weird needs that most people don't have. One of the things was the move-in air conditioning and heating because of my neurological issues, and I live in Washington State where most people don't have air conditioning. Heating, yes. Air conditioning, no. Not unless you live in a big fancy house that we couldn't afford. And so over these years I looked every day at houses and worked really hard so that we could be prepared when the house came along. And here we were 1 year out and no closer to a house. Here we were 6 months out, no closer to a house. She's going to come back in and take away our home in 6 months, and we have no place to go. And the prices of the houses were just getting higher and higher, just further and further out of reach. And again, it's not just a house. This is something I need for it's very particular for me that I really, really need, not luxury, but a need. And I love how God, when he blesses you, sometimes you get what you need in a very practical sense, like the fan. Other times he blesses you with so much more than you ever could have hoped and dreamt, like ever. We were like 3 months before we had to have a house or we're going to be put out. The landlord had already started moving stuff into our garage. And all of a sudden there was this house that was in our price range, but it was amazing. I for the 15 plus years, and a lot of them where I was sick, I was confined to the house we were in, small little house, really dark. This one little room, a really dark little one room, not much for windows. I was super isolated from the world. And God showed me this house, this big. It's not fancy. It's not been updated since the 70s, I don't think, but it's big and spacious so that even when I'm confined to my home, I can like go places. And there's more windows than I know what to do with. I've both gotten the privacy from the trees and bushes and beautiful nature, both privacy so that I can keep the windows open as they are, and the ability to see the outside from inside, so I can be climate controlled and still watch the squirrels and the deer sitting in my couch. It's the most beautiful home, more than I ever could have asked for. And this is in the middle of when the housing prices, people were always paying a significant more than asking, and we could not pay a penny over asking. It would take people, 10 or more times of submitting all this stuff just to be turned away. This is the type of housing market was, and it was almost impossible to get your house. This was the only house that suited our needs, and we put in for it. We went, we saw it that day, and immediately we knew this was our house. So we found a realtor. We submitted for it. By the time I got God granted me the ability to do everything I had to do to get this submitted in a timely manner, which is in itself amazing. I got the stuff submitted at midnight. 11 a.m. the next day, we have the house. Not only do we not pay more than asking, but they somehow, in the line between us submitting it and their receiving it, they had dropped the house by $15,000. They put a $15,000 buyer bonus up. So not only did we not pay for the anymore because we couldn't, but they actually dropped it, which gave us this huge amount of relief because it was right at the line of what we could do. And I have been blessed with this most beautiful home now for a couple of years. And again, if you're not familiar with the housing market, and if you haven't, it's not something you've tried, not something you're familiar with, if you're not familiar with the circumstances, it's hard for you to see the miracle in it. But it truly, truly was and is a miracle. And I've been blessed so much by it. And this is the last one because I'm way over, but this is really important. So sometimes God blesses you with more than you could have asked for, which is in the house situation. Sometimes God blesses you in the way that he gives you what you need. Maybe I didn't get full healing. I'm still sick, but he gave me what I needed to get through it, right? And then this is the last one. I'll try and be quick. My father, who recently passed away, I was down in California for a couple of months because he was in the hospital that entire time, cancer, really bad cancer. And for those of you that know me, you know, I'm very emotional. I am by nature, God has gifted me. This is something that's useful as a shepherd, that I am, I tap into emotions, mine and the emotions of others. And when I went down there, for whatever reason, I knew before I left that my father was dying. I knew this before I left. That is why I left when I did. My mom was trying to say, wait till later, blah, blah, blah. But I saw my father on the video, and in that moment, I knew he was dying. So before I left, I chose what am I going to wear, the funeral, this and that. And I sought off to go to California to be with him as long as I could. And my first reaction, of course, was, I'm so emotional. Everybody's trying to hold it together so that, you know, they can care for him. And I'm this basket case to the point where my mom actually kicked me out of the house that very next day. She says, I don't, there's a long story that we can't, all I can say is that my mom was loving me in that action. It wasn't just for my father, it was for me. She was afraid that, because the very first day my father was at home, and she was afraid that seeing him like this would be too much for me. And she knows that I'm sick, and she knows how it actually affects me physically too, not just emotionally, but physically affects me. And so she was doing it, and she was loving me in her asking me to go stay with my sister instead of in the house. The very next day, my father ended up in the hospital and never came out. But I digress. It was my emotions and that had her have me leave. And my father was at the hospital, so I was going to the hospital every day, and I was really struggling. I didn't want him to experience I didn't want to do that to him. But as much as I tried and tried, I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop it because I knew he was going to die, and I couldn't constrain myself. And I prayed, God, please, please just give me the ability to not do this to my father. I know expressing emotions are good and helpful, but sometimes got to figure out how to contain them too. And I didn't have that ability. And I actually used this moment to testify to my father on his deathbed because he was an atheist. After a lot of time with God, I showed up the next day in the hospital, and I was just even. I was just calm, loving, even. And I told my dad when he was unconscious at this moment, I am showing you this amazing ability, but this isn't mine. You know, Dad, I don't have this ability. You know this. You're my dad. God has given this to me so that I may love you well during this time, so that I don't create more turmoil. Even if you're not conscious, you seeing me in such grief hurts you because you love me so much, and I don't want to hurt you. And God has given me this ability, and I'm going to show you day after day after day that he has given me this. And sure enough, day after day after day, ultimately my father died. So just because, of course, I'm praying for his this miracle to be his life, of course I am. It wasn't the time. Oh, thank you, Jolly. Yes, praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Oh my gosh. So of course you don't always get what you're looking for. I didn't get to keep my father on this earth at this time, but I did get to love him well as he deserves and needed. And ultimately, even, I'm not sure if there's in what part this played, but he went into the hospital an atheist and he died a Christian. So